Welcome to Books in the Freezer, a podcast dedicated to the deliciously disturbing world of horror fiction. I'm your host, Stephanie, and I am so excited to be joined by Mallory O'Meara and Brea Grant from the Reading Glasses podcast to talk about horror by women. So, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having us.
I am so excited to have you guys on. I think there is a bit of overlap in Books in the Freezer listeners and Reading Glasses listeners. But for those listeners who are not aware, can you tell them about Reading Glasses?
Yeah, sure. Brea, take it away.
Oh, we are also a book podcast, but we don't do specific books, but we'll do specific types of books, and we're more about like reading life in general. So we do everything from covering book tech, like the latest, really, really silly stuff, like the latest like book lights or things to hold your book up with while reading, or even we recently got a chair for reading that we were going to review.
Okay. So, that is not you. Really, you.
A chair is generous. Chair is generous. It's
generous. It took up my entire hallway.
It's more of an air-filled beanbag. So things like that. We review stuff, but then we'll do like an episode on specific types of books, as well as like just episodes generally about reading. So like things you can do with your public library, stuff like that. So you don't have to. You don't need to read a book before listening. You should have read one book, probably.
Just one.
No specific book, because we're not a book club. It's very rare we go into like specific books. It's more about reading in general.
Yeah, it's about reading life. Yeah, I think that's a good. Brea, you got it.
Yeah, and what I'll say is that like Mallory and I, the crossover I think is that we both like horror books a lot, so this makes sense. And I think, and a lot of our listeners definitely skew genre because we talk about genre so much.
We do. We're huge. We're both into horror. Brea's into space. I'm into weird fiction. Anything that sort of crosses over into those worlds is our purview.
I like that. Yeah, you guys cover a lot. So honestly, anyone with any book opinions can listen.
Yeah.
Yes.
That's the goal.
And Mallory, you have Girly Drinks coming out.
I do. That's the funny thing for us is that Brea is a filmmaker and a writer. I am a author and a filmmaker, and now we're at the point where people know us just from Reading Glasses, and they're like, "Wait, you?" So we constantly get folks who are like, "I was watching a movie the other day, and it was directed by Brea Grant." We're like, "Yeah, we do other things too." But I'm a nonfiction author. Brea writes comics. And my newest book, Girly Drinks, is the history of women drinking from the beginning of time until now. And it is out in October 19th.
Well, that's awesome. What was the search process for that like? That sounds so interesting.
Well, it would have been amazing if I didn't have to write the entire thing during the lockdown last year. So the research was really fun, but it was very difficult to do a worldwide history of a subject while I couldn't leave my one-bedroom apartment. A lot of online archives, a lot of trips to the library when they finally opened up. But it was pretty great. The reading I had to do was absolutely fantastic. I just wish that I could have, there's a lot of bars and distilleries and breweries that I really wanted to go to all over the world. And hopefully I'll still get to go there someday. But I'm very excited about it. It's actually my first foray into the world of non-genre. It's like, it's the first time I'm writing a book for normal people. I'm very nervous about it. But I know there's a lot of horror people that are cocktail nerds and wine nerds and beer nerds.
What will the normies think?
I'm nervous. I've never done anything for normal people.
I did an interview today and I called you a horror nonfiction writer. And then I was like, oh, maybe she's not. And then I was like, but I don't know how to explain that. But like up until now, a horror nonfiction writer.
I guess you could just say nonfiction or history because they're both, sure. I mean, my first book, Lady from the Black Lagoon, sure. is also a history and biography, but it's definitely horror adjacent. Yeah. And you mostly stay in genre, although more of like genre in a vague way, like genre either thriller, genre crime, black comedies, sci-fi, like no matter if you're writing, because Mary, your graphic novel that came out last year, would you call Mary horror? I would.
I actually call it YA sci-fi, but it has like horror leanings too. I mean, I always throw the YA in there because I feel like it has very like YA tropes, like not in a negative way. We just did an episode on tropes about how we like tropes. We're pro trope.
We're very pro trope.
But yeah, I mean, it is horror slash science fiction, but I think because its namesake is Mary Shelley, who I consider to be the mother of like modern sci-fi. I kind of think of it more as a science fiction book.
Yeah, I saw you just came back from New Orleans. How was that?
It's good. I got out right before the hurricane, which if you're listening and you haven't given money to a Hurricane Ida support, I would encourage you to do that. Like, people truly lost their homes. It's a very sad situation there. But before that, it was wonderful. You know, I liked to complain about the weather, and now I feel like I have no actual complaints. But it was very nice. I was directing a movie for Blumhouse that'll be out next year.
Oh, wow. Exciting.
Yeah.
So what are you guys reading right now?
I'm glad you asked that because I brought this down here. I'm reading this comic that my boyfriend got me into. It's called Homesick Pilots, and the trade just came out, and it's about these ghosts who, in order to fight these giant monsters, they get into haunted houses and pilot them like Jaegers from Pacific Rim. And yeah, both Brea and I are big monster people. So when my boyfriend told me what this comic was, I was like, give me that now. Give me that.
I have been, so something Mallory and I like to do on the show is we tell people to dump that book if you're not enjoying the book. And y'all, I have dumped a lot of books lately. I've gone through like 3 books that I've read like a third of and stopped. But last night I started the new Stephen Graham Jones book, who I think is about to be on your show. Isn't he about to be on your show?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's what I thought. So I'm reading My Heart is a Chainsaw as of last night. So I've read, 15 pages before I fell asleep, but it's good so far.
It's you have to, if you're a horror reader, you should absolutely be reading My Heart is a Chainsaw. It is unmissable for horror fans.
And we both really liked his last book. I thought his last book was really interesting and super surreal. And I just think he has such an interesting way of approaching horror that we don't, it's not very straightforward, but if you're like in for the ride, then it's great. Like, it's such like literary fiction, like Venn diagram. Like, I can recommend it to like literary fiction snobs, his stuff, but also like horror people. And I feel like he's like that. People who like both will also like him.
I agree. I loved the Slasher 101 chapters in My Heart is a Chainsaw.
Oh, yeah, it's definitely
me. I'm not very far into this book. Don't tell me. Actually, you can tell me. But yes, actually, I remember someone saying that because I just read, or I just had a book club because I'm in a book club about support group, and they're saying there's like crossovers there. As far as
I think Grady and Stephen already actually did an event together because their books are like made. They should just give the books. They should sell the books together.
Yeah, like when you go to a bookstore, you just get both, like a package deal.
Yeah,
they really, really should. It's like when you go to the store and they sometimes like they'll put everything out. Like my old grocery store, every Sunday they used to put out a supply of orange juice and like those tiny bottles of champagne to sell at the same time because people know they just aren't going to want to buy them together. I feel like those 2 books are the same way.
I like that.
I agree. They complement each other very well. So I wanted to ask why you both are passionate about horror created by women.
Well, we're women. First off, it's for basically every reason you possibly could have. One, we're definitely women and we're huge feminists. I don't want to speak for you, Brea, but I'm assuming.
What if this is how you found out?
You were like, actually, I voted for Trump. I hate women. No.
Like, we've been doing a podcast together for like 4 or 5 years. We talk about feminism all the time. I'm like, oh, no.
You're like, that's something I did in college. No, but we're both really, really passionate about feminism and intersectional feminism and supporting women in any possible way we can. I also just think I had the experience of growing up I grew up in New England in like a very, Irish white place. And I didn't really start reading books by women or especially women of color until I was in college. I mean, I actually look back I don't think I was ever assigned a book written by anyone who wasn't a white guy in high school or middle school at all. So I kind of came to it later in life. And my early 20s, that's when I started getting into feminism, and I realized like, oh my God, I've never read a horror book by a woman. Like, what's wrong with me? A lot of things. And I started reading everything I could find, and I just became extremely hooked on the experience of reading horror written by and about women. It's just my favorite thing to read. We were just talking about Stephen Graham Jones and Grady Hendrix. There's lots of male horror authors that I love, but it is just something that means a lot to me, and I always enjoy the experience, especially like fun, like new. There's so many great new horror authors that are women that are coming out with their debut books, and I'm just like, the more the merrier. I want them all. I want to read them all.
Yeah. I mean, to piggyback on that, I think it's just such an interesting time in horror right now. I mean, it has been, I think, for the last like 10 years, but it's really gaining steam in an interesting way. In that we, like, as horror fans, I think we're all very versed in horror, right? That's like the nice thing about a horror fan is they pretty much like, they're going to know the tropes, they're going to know the world, and we're always looking for more horror. Like, we cannot get enough. And we're always looking for new takes on the horror that we've seen before. Like, and I think horror and genre in general, more than any other kinds of genre, are just really looking for new voices all the time and new takes on things they've seen over and over again. Like, we all know the slasher, we're ready to see a new take on the slasher, which I think is why, I don't know, I haven't finished it, but Stephen Graham Jones's book and Grady Hendrix's book are so interesting to people, because we're like ready for that new take on like the final girl, the new take on the slasher. And I think when you're getting these new voices, when you're getting women and people of color and queer folks in there writing horror, we're going to have just people who are thinking outside of the box in a way, and writing from a perspective that we haven't seen in the past, and especially 30, 40 years ago. I mean, and I always say that, but with the caveat that like, there were women writing, obviously there were like people of color writing. There's some amazing like Black feminist sci-fi writers and black horror feminist writers who've been around, since the 70s through the 90s. There's so many amazing women that I feel like people are sort of unearthing as well. But overall, I mean, I just think it's just a great time right now, and to hear new voices, and I think we're all down for that, because as horror fans, all we want is to like make the genre better. We want to improve the genre, and I think that a lot of the people doing that are women.
Yeah, and I do want to add too that I think it's really important to keep having these conversations. It might feel like, oh, like, why do we need to do a whole episode on like women in horror? Because I have conversations in interviews about this stuff a lot for my first book, Lady from the Black Lagoon, and people are like, oh, do you think we're past that? And I'm like, oh, how many women got nominated for an Oscar last year? How many women got nominated for, Best Director? And they're like, oh yeah. I'm like, yeah, as much as this conversation is so salient and topical, and everyone talks about it on Twitter and online all the time, like, we still need to push, like, we still need to support these creators, these authors, these filmmakers, these comic writers, whatever, because, it's still like a majority white guy world out there. So we, as much as the conversation is there, we still need to keep pushing, keep supporting, keep helping women make the kind of art that they want to make.
Yeah, because I think a lot of people's experiences are just like Mallory's, where, in high school, the foundational works that you're reading, even if you're reading horror, you might read Shirley Jackson, you might read The Lottery. Like, that's one that I feel like comes up. Maybe you're reading Frankenstein. But besides that, you're not really dipping into like that many. I mean, and those are like the major like female authors you're reading in general, not just in horror. Besides maybe a Jane Austen or something like that. So I think until we start seeing women included like on these important books that need to be read lists, because there are so many of them, that I think we still have to keep having this conversation.
For sure.
I agree. And I do like seeing the different forms that horror can take place and the boundaries being pushed. Like, I love like female body horror. Like, I know you just had Becky Spratford on, and she talked about Queen of Teeth, and
I just ordered that book. I just ordered it.
When I was doing that interview, I was like, Becky, Brea is going to listen to this and immediately order this book.
Vagina, teeth, tentacles. Like, yeah.
Oh, for sure.
We are all in for that. Well, with that, are we ready to talk about some books?
We're always ready to talk about books. You could call me and Brea up at 3:00 in the morning. Please don't.
Like, do you need a book recommendation? We're here.
We're ready. We're ready. We're constantly ready.
hotline.
That's my dream, actually, is to retire and just have like a book recommendation hotline, and I can.
Mallory, I firmly believe that if you started a 900 number, do people still do 900 numbers? You mean pay by the minute? Is that still a thing?
Yeah, maybe like a text, like right, like that.
Like, but you, I think people would pay like by the minute to have Mallory talk to them and recommend a book. Now, do I think that it would be some weirdos calling you?
Oh yeah,
but I think you would handle it fine.
I just hang up on them, but oh, what a dream! Especially
like you might have to say it in a sexy voice, but also I think you could get book.
You have a special.
Read
They're like
Shirley
doing it
Jackson.
in a New England accent. Do it in a New England accent.
New England accents are the least. That would be really funny to see a phone sex line staffed entirely by people from the Boston area, because it would be the least sexy thing that you've ever heard in your entire life.
Oh my gosh, didn't they had the like worst accent in America, like contest, like bracket thing, and I live in Pittsburgh, and Pittsburgh ended up winning that.
You beat us. I
know. I was like, I can't believe we beat Boston. But yeah, like it was like ugliest or worst accent in America.
Well, Brea and I constantly have these conversations on the show, because sometimes we're trying to figure out how to pronounce something, and I'm like, I'm from Boston and you're from Texas. Like, we are definitely mispronouncing whatever's happening here. Maybe we can call you in. We need someone in the middle to make a calling here on the pronunciations.
This episode is brought to you by Libro FM. Libro FM is the first and only company which lets you purchase audiobooks directly from your favorite local bookstore. You can pick from more than 150,000 audiobooks, including bestsellers and recommendations from booksellers. You'll get the same audiobooks at the same price as the largest audiobook company out there. You know the name. But you'll be part of a different story, one that supports community. If you're new to audiobooks, they're the perfect way to get more books into your busy life. Listen during your commute, while doing chores, walking the dog, or just relaxing at home. All you need is a smartphone and the free Libro FM app. If you already love audiobooks and don't know what to listen to next, check out recommendations and curated lists from people who know audiobooks best. Booksellers. And us. We also have a playlist on there full of books that have been recommended on this podcast. Books in the Freezer special offer. You get 2 audiobooks for the price of one, just $14.99, with your first month of membership using code FreezerBook. This offer is valid for new members in Canada and the United States. Thank you, Libro FM, for supporting the show. All right. I'll go first. So my first pick is The Return by Rachel Harrison. Have either of you?
Yeah, we both love both of these so much.
I just looked at her Instagram today like a creep. Like I was like, she came up and then I went and like looked at a lot of her photos to be like, what is Rachel Harrison up to?
She's good at Instagram. And I'm excited for her new book, Cackle, which is a witch book, comes out next month, which I'm wicked pumped about.
I just finished it because I'm talking to her this week, and it was so fun. It was very like practical magic-y. Like I was like, I love this.
But The Return fucked me up. That's a pretty scary book.
It is. So for people who don't know, this is about a group of kind of girlfriends, and one of their friends, Julie, just kind of disappears without a trace, and she's gone for 2 years. And the group is kind of ready to mourn her, but we are seeing this through Elise's lens, and she is not ready to move on. Like, she goes to the funeral and she just feels like she is still out there. And she ends up being proven right, because 2 years later, to the day that she went missing, she just shows up with no memory of what happened to her. And, it's a whole thing. She was a missing person. She goes on the news. Like, it's a thing. But the group of friends decide to do like a girls trip at an eclectic hotel. Like, they all have these like really weird themed rooms, and they're all getting
the Madonna Inn up here in California.
Yeah. I was thinking that, but I was like, is that because that's my only like basis for this? Is because okay.
Sure. Yeah, it's totally the Madonna Inn.
Yeah.
I love the Madonna Inn. It was wild.
Did you find any creepy ladies there? Like the events of this book?
Ladies that were vegetarian but now are not vegetarian all of a sudden. Really creepy. Yeah, so like things like that start happening, and like all the friends except Julie, like Elise and the other two, are like, she seems weird, right? Like something's not right with her, and they can't put their finger on what's going on. And then people in the hotel start disappearing. It's a whole thing. Like you guys said, this was dark, and this was surprising in a way that I think I thought I knew where the book was going, and I was like, okay, like I think I get this. And then it just took a turn where I was like, okay, that's not what I was guessing was happening. But one thing I really liked was the group dynamic and the relationship that the friends had with each other, and the relationship that Elise had with Julie. Like, she was like, I felt like I had the special connection with her. Like, Julie could kind of like call me out on my shit, and like she felt comfortable doing it, and we had like this special bond and all this stuff. And I think that was the best part about it to me, was the way that the female friendships were done in their specific relationships just felt very real. Like, one of the complaints I saw about this book was that like the conversations were a bit circular. Like, she's weird, right? Like, that wasn't normal.
I was like, have you ever met a lady? Have you ever heard a group of girls talk to each other?
But that's what would happen. You know, she leaves and they would be like, that was weird, right? That she always do that? She didn't always do that. Right. So I don't know. I had a ton of fun with this one, and it was after this one that I was like, okay, well, now I have to read Cackle. So I would say this is Fridge to me. The way that this ended up going, it had a surprising amount of horror. Like, I really, really liked this, and that is The Return by Rachel Harrison.
Yeah, I would say Fridge. It's not definitely not a freezer level, but it's really spooky.
Yeah.
Like, it is. This is definitely a book that goes on like a no-fly list for bringing to a cabin. Like, do not bring this book if you are going on vacation and are going somewhere isolated in any shape or form.
And I think there's something scary about this book too, that like the thought of your female friends disappearing, that alone is like a scary premise to me. So like, I think that it like goes in with something that is very specifically like a female perspective of a very like specific relationship, but also scary.
Well, I think I went into this too kind of thinking it was more of a thriller. So I was like, we'll see. Like, I just had very set expectations for what this was going to be. And I'm like, oh, this is horror. This is like capital H horror.
Oh, for sure.
My first recommendation is The Deep by Alma Katsu. So a lot of people have read her first book, which was, or the book before this, which was The Hunger. I don't know if it was actually her first book.
I don't know, but it was like, I think it was her first big horror book.
Yeah. But both books are historical horror fiction, I guess is what I would call it. The first one takes place at during with the Donner Party. I guess it's not an event. I don't know how you explain it, but the Donner Party and
I would say that. I think you're right.
During their party that they threw. Remember that party they threw? No one wanted to go.
Worst party ever.
But it has like a supernatural twist, and this one is similar, but it's the Titanic. And I feel like this one went under the radar a little bit compared to The Hunger for some reason. And basically it starts with a nurse who goes onto this ship, which was a Titanic sister ship. And it's, she's a nurse during a war, and I don't know when it was, but, and she remembers that she was on the Titanic and survived. She was on the Titanic and survived. And so when she goes onto this ship, she's like, oh shit, this is the Titanic. Like, it looks just like the Titanic. And all
this
these, like,
fucker again, god damn it.
Are you kidding? I survived this bitch. Have you seen the movie? Like 5 people survived. We were on rafts. We killed DiCaprio. So she was like, she worked on the ship when it was she worked on the Titanic. And then it kind of flashes back and forward to the Titanic, and a bunch of mysterious things that happen there. There's some people on the ship who are really interested in like communicating with spirits, and then there's someone who disappears, and it ends up being this like kind of thriller with like supernatural stuff happening, and all takes place in it's not a locked room, but a locked ship. You know what I mean? Like, so it's like, and I love something that takes place at one location in like in a very set period of time. Which it's going to be a set period of time because it's the Titanic. It's not going to last. To something. There's an end. You know how this book ends. So it's really great, and I would recommend either of these books for horror readers who love fiction. I mean, historical fiction, and And I would say these cross over into like literary fiction as well. And she's just a great writer. I just really liked this book. Oh, and
sorry.
Go ahead.
I was going to say I was wondering if you would put this on the counter or on the fridge.
I think this one, there were parts of it that were really scary. I would say this is a fridge book. I'd say this is a fridge. I wouldn't put it quite in the freezer. I think it's just scary enough to where it might need to cool down in there with like the hummus and orange juice and champagne.
Yeah, I'm really biased on the deep because I'm really afraid of the ocean. So just like you could set anything on a boat, especially the Titanic, which I'm very afraid of. And
sinking or like the things there, or like
there's something of anything that takes place in open water or like things underwater. And like very deep water scare the absolute shit out of me. So
that's very scary.
Yeah, the ocean, don't trust the ocean. Yeah, but I would, so maybe like, maybe in like the crisper with the vegetables, like not full fridge.
The lettuce. Yeah. Mallory, you want to go?
Yes, I'm really I'm sorry to Brea, who has to listen to both of my picks that I already talk about every day of my life. My first pick is a book called White is for Witching by Helen Oyayemi, who is one of my favorite authors. She's a weird fiction author, and I would say this is her horroriest book. Like most of her other books are just like weird fiction. This is the only one she really has that's very scary. And part of the reason I love it is because it's a haunted house novel, and I have an addiction to haunted house novels. I will read any book that takes place in a haunted house. And this is a story about this teenage girl. Her name's Miranda. She's a twin. And she lives in this house that it's sort of like it's a haunted house, but it's a haunted house that is like a lot of, we see a lot of haunted houses in fiction that are like suffused with memories and they're like replaying terrible scenes. Like this is a haunted house that is sentient. Like it is acting in the present day, and it is xenophobic, it is racist, it is not a great house. It's this house that's been in the family for a really long time. They're like really, she comes from a rich family, and as she gets into the events of the story, she finds out like some of the things that happened to other women who were in her family. One woman that went missing kind of realizes that this house has been sort of meddling in affairs and driving these women to do bad things and to go mad, and it's absolutely terrifying. It's really freaky, and she starts to like lose her own identity in amongst these stories of all these other women, and it's very surreal. It's very weird. But I love it so much. I love her writing style. It's she's definitely like very a lyrical writer. Her like on a sentence level, her writing is really, really beautiful. But it's also scary. I'm not going to put this in the freezer. I have a really high, we call them on reading glasses, the chili rating, like how many chilies would be next to a horror would be next to this book on a menu. I would put this on the counter, maybe next to a bag of pita chips or something. But because it's more, it's not super scary, but I can see where someone else might put this in the fridge, not the freezer. Brea, what do you think? Super scary or not?
Yeah, I don't think any of Helen Oyayemi stuff is very like, I feel like it's counter worthy, but it is always really weird and like eerie.
Yeah, but it's not, I don't think it needs to be encased in a fridge.
I have this one on my shelf and I have not gotten around to reading it yet. I too love a good haunted house story. Like
my other one's a haunted house story too. I remember one year Brea and I did some episode about horror books, and Brea was like, Mallory, is every single book that you picked on? And I was booking, I was like, oh shit, I didn't even notice.
Different kinds of haunted house, different flavors.
Yes, totally different.
I basically have Mallory like sees a couple on the verge of breaking up, moving into a house they think is going to help. Like she like follows them in and is like watching behind the couch, like seeing what's going to happen. This is her dream.
Oh, that is like my favorite setup too.
It's the setup for like every haunted house book, but it works. It totally works. It's just
if it's not broke, don't fix it. Give me those sad people trying to fix their relationship in a crappy house they paid too much money for.
Oh man, like the grip of it. That wasn't your next pick, was it?
No.
The grip of it is 100% that. Yeah, that which is a great book, but it's like, it is very much like the couple moving into and it's weird. And is this a new room that you've never seen before?
Yeah.
Where's this like weird black mold coming from? I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
All right, so my next pick is Goddess of Filth by V. Castro,
which I've been meaning to read forever.
I've never read it either. Wow.
Yeah, it's a short one too. It's like only 140 pages, I want to say. I will read the synopsis because I feel like there's too much going on for me to like summarize it on my own, and I want to get it all. So it's one hot summer night. Best friends Lourdes, Fernanda, Ana, Perla, and Pauline hold a seance, and it's all fun and games, but their tipsy laughter turns to terror when the flames burn straight through their prayer candles, and Fernanda starts crawling towards her friends and chanting in Nahuatl. That's an Aztec word. So I'm sorry if I mispronounced that, the language of their Aztec ancestors. Over the next few weeks, shy, modest Fernanda starts acting strangely, smearing herself in black makeup, shredding her hands on rose thorns, sucking sin out of the mouths of the guilty. The local priest is convinced it's a demon, but Lourdes begins to suspect it's something else, something far more ancient and powerful. And as Father Moreno's obsession with Fernanda grows, Lourdes enlists the help of her bruja craft crew and a professor to understand what is happening to her friend in this unholy tale of possession gone right.
Ooh, yeah, I've had this on my to buy list for a while.
Yeah, this was really fun. Like they all get together. I think it's like the night before high school graduation and kind of do this like fun little seance. And like the good girl of the group is like the one that gets possessed, and she just starts acting like really weird and wearing dark makeup and like being like much more sexually aggressive than she usually is. Like I would describe this as kind of The Craft meets Jennifer's Body with Mexican teens in Texas.
Ooh, I love that.
Oh, I didn't know it took place in Texas. Brea must read all Texas
I do
books.
love all the Texas books. It's very true. Very true.
I really liked this, and all of V. Castro's books just have this. She just captures like female rage, I think, like in a way that just comes through, and it is like the prose is like biting. Like it is like you feel it. You feel like the passion and the anger going on, and I love it. It is definitely like The Craft meets Jennifer's Body.
That's a great pitch. That's a great pitch.
Nice.
And I had a ton of fun. I read this in one sitting. Like I could not put this down. And that is this, I would say, like the cold part of the fridge.
Oh, in the back where like everything gets kind of freezer burned.
Yeah, like you're gonna risk a bit of freezer burn on it, but not quite. Like it's not gonna give you nightmares, but it doesn't hold back. So that is Goddess of Filth by V. Castro.
Cool. Man, I almost just called an audible and did a different book, but I do like this. Okay, I'm gonna just use the book I decided on. I had another thought where I just another book came up that I was like, ooh, should I? Whatever, it's fine. So my next one is Bunny by Mona Awad, which is a great, fantastic book. Speaking of New England, it's about this woman Samantha who is in an MFA program, and if you've ever been in a master's program, that's the true horror. She is a scholarship student. She she feels like she doesn't fit in with all of these other women in her program who are just, they're super kind of uppity and they're very like cliquish, and they all call each other Bunny. Like that they refer to each other as Bunny, and they're really like, they're the rich girls at school, and they like look down on everybody else. And at some point they invite her to this salon that they have called the Smut Salon, and she decides like she's gonna go, and she goes and she realizes that there's some like ritual stuff happening there. There's some weird shit happening there, and reality starts to kind of not make much sense as she slowly becomes one of the bunnies. And I would say like just speaking of like Jennifer's Body and things, is like it's very like Heather's meets like with like more magical realism in it. It is like There is something. Look, there's nothing scarier than a lady clique. There's nothing scarier
they do
than
so much hugging.
Oh,
so much hugging. So much touching.
So good at leaving people out. Like that. There was nothing like more horrible than being a teenage girl and being left out of a clique. Like that was peak horror for me. And so this kind of recaptured that for me in a lot of ways. And also the horror of being like, I always felt like I went to graduate school and I felt like I was like the dumbest person in my program. And like she kind of captures that as well, what it's like to go to graduate school and be like, I don't know what the fuck is going on. And like not caring, but trying to care. And like, she just kind of captures the insecurities that come with being that age, being around a group that is obviously treating you as an outsider, and then them suddenly being like, oh, you can be a part of us, and like what the lengths you'll go to be a part of that.
It's so sinister. That's really the best word I can think of it.
It is, and it's very like surreal, and it gets weirder and weirder. I would say this is like a cross between like a weird fiction, literary fiction, and horror. Which makes me think it's like a countertop book. Like I think it's more of like maybe it's in your kitchen counter. It might even live in your dining room or something, but like it depends on like what scares you. Obviously all these do, I think, but that one for sure is it's not a straight up horror. There's no one running around with a knife trying to murder you. Although it does get weird.
They're running around with an emotional knife.
Yeah.
I started listening to this as an audiobook and I had to stop because the narrator was too good at doing like the bunny. No, bunny. I was like,
yes. I listened to it. I did like a listen. I read half and then I listened to the end of it. And yeah, it is horrifying. It's irritating on purpose. And you're like,
yes. And I'm like, I know this was what you were going for. I can't do this today. Thank you.
About all the time. I'm so sorry, Brea, but I'm so obsessed with it. I love this author. I love everything she's ever written. It's The Red Tree by Caitlyn Kiernan, who I just adore. And this is another haunted house book. It is about this woman, and she's was living down south, and she gets out of a crappy relationship, and she's a writer, and she moves into this old farmhouse in Rhode Island, New England, and she in the basement, which is of course the first place you got to go when you move into a creepy house, she finds this part, like this weird manuscript that was written by the previous occupant of the house, who was I think an anthropologist, and the whole manuscript is about how the previous occupant of the house just became obsessed by this tree that's on the property. It's this it's just like creepy ass tree, and as she's reading through this manuscript, it just becomes clear that the previous occupant of the house just started slowly losing their mind, and like this tree, the red tree, became like the center of their world. And of course that's what starts happening to her. She starts getting really obsessed with the tree. Between that and like the stuff that happens in the creepy farmhouse, this is a really, really scary book. It's great because there are it's a book to read if you like checking out like little bits of other manuscripts and things, and I forget the word for it, but if you love a book that has like little parts of other stories in it, because you get to read some of the manuscript along with the protagonist, which is really fun, and it's just great. It's a great autumn book, because you got New England, fall in New England, you got a spooky house, you got a spooky tree with red leaves. Like it is really perfect for autumn. But this is a freezer book. I have a very high tolerance for it's very hard for a book to scare me, and this is a freezer book for certain. Like put some frozen peas on top of it just in case it doesn't open up. It's spooky. It's really good. You just read this, Brea, right?
Yeah, I just read it. It's also and it's also the protagonist is queer, which is great.
Oh yeah.
For those who are looking for that, yeah, it's great. Super scary, super like isolation horror, which is something I really like. And I feel like, yeah, this is a good isolation horror.
Yeah, and I always forget, because a lot of people forget Caitlyn Kiernan, who is a trans woman, when they're doing roundups of queer horror, because she's been writing for so long. Like a lot of her books came out in the early 90s, and most of her books are have queer female protagonists, so she's been doing it for a while, and all her books are fantastic. She has another series that's more urban fantasy than it is horror, but her other book, The Drowning Girl, is also very, very spooky, very surreal, very queer. She's just fantastic. I'm like one of those annoying people. Like I'm just like a one-woman street team for Caitlyn Kiernan.
Yeah, this one has been on my TBR. I didn't know it was a freezer book, though. That is.
Oh, it's scary as shit. It's a really scary book. Really good haunted house, because there's just enough. If you're the kind of person who gets freaked out by books where you're not 100% sure what's happening, I think Bunny's kind of like this too, where you're like going through it with the protagonist, and you're like, I don't know if what's happening is really happening, or at least if it's happening in the way that the protagonist thinks it's happening.
Yeah, it's an unreliable narrator situation. And especially the red tree. There's a part of the red tree that is very scary where she's like walking towards the tree, and this is not that much of a spoiler, but like she keeps walking and she's like, why haven't I gotten there yet? It wasn't that far. Like stuff like that where you're like, and then she just keeps not getting there, and you're like, oh my God, like what is she gonna get there? Like it's just like this weird. I would not read it if you were like alone in your home by yourself for some extended period of time.
Yeah, it's definitely, you plan this stuff out. This is not a book you want to bring. This is a book you read in like the mall.
Yeah, bring it home for the holidays with your family.
Yeah. It's funny, I just moved up from LA to the mountains, and I was telling my boyfriend, I was like, I'm kind of afraid that it's going to affect my reading choices now, because there's like a lot of things I don't want to read while I'm up here, because we're really remote, and I'm like, oh man, I'm going to
misery.
Oh yeah, anything like that. I'm like, oh, I'm really nervous that I'm not gonna be able to read this stuff anymore.
So what are you gonna do about all those books about those sad couples who buy homes in the mountains?
Put them in the freezer. I'll take them on vacation with me. Not that any of us are going to be going on vacation soon, but yeah, I've noticed that, because right now I'm also reading Chuck Wendig's new book, The Book of Accidents, which is exactly that. Couple going to a house to fix their problems, and scary stuff happens. And I've been reading it like only during the day, because I'm really nervous to read it at night.
I love that. So I'm gonna have to get to these books. So
I definitely, we both need to read Queen of Teeth, I think,
yeah.
Or Goddess of Filth. Queen of Teeth is another book.
Queen of Teeth. That I literally just bought Queen of Teeth, so I mean that is on my list. But Goddess of Filth is now going to be on my list.
Yeah, I can't wait till you hear what you guys think of them. Something I do like to ask all the guests that come on the show is for a chilling obsession or something in horror that you've been enjoying lately. It can be a movie, show, podcast, book, anything.
Besides me being obsessed with haunted houses, because that's definitely true. Let me think. I
mean, I love like sci-fi horror, and it's shocking I didn't bring like a sci-fi horror book to this. I was sitting there thinking I should, but so I can talk about a book that I wanted to talk about, but didn't. But there's this book called The Luminous Dead, which is a great horror sci-fi stuff. And I love genre smashing, where you put two different things and you combine them, and sci-fi horror, two of my favorite genres. So yeah, anytime you can put like a horror book in space, or like a horror book in, in some weird dystopian future, like I'm there for that.
I think my other obsession besides haunted houses is definitely werewolves. I actually have all of my werewolf books pulled out of our library, and they have their own special shelf, because I have so many of them and I love them so much. And some of them are more literary and aren't like meant to be horror, but I will literally read anything that has a horror or has a werewolf character. People are dealing with it. Doesn't matter if they are werewolves, if they're fighting werewolves, if they want to kiss some werewolves. Like I just want, because you can use werewolf mythology as a metaphor for so many different types of things. And it's like the haunted house thing. I can endlessly read stories about either werewolves coming of age or people fighting werewolves that are eating their small town. I'm completely obsessed.
Ooh, what are some of your favorites? Because I feel like that's something I have a hard time finding.
Oh, this is why I need to run my recommendation line. Yeah.
1-900 Mallory. 1-900 Mallory.
I actually think that works, because it's 7.
Oh yeah.
Oh well,
See if you can get it.
No, please, no listeners, don't take that phone number. I'm gonna get it. Well, we were talking about Stephen Graham Jones. His novel Mongrels is absolutely incredible. Some other ones I really like, Sharp Teeth by Toby Barlow, which is all less horror, but it's still really fun. It's all written in verse, and it's about a bunch of werewolves in LA who are going up against these dog catchers that are determined to find them. Let me look at some more recent ones. I love The Devourers by Indra Das. That is really fun because it's like Indian mythology and werewolves, and it's very, very historical. Fans of Almakatsu will love that one. Let me see. Oh, The Last Werewolf trilogy by Glenn Duncan. I absolutely am nuts about. Hemlock Grove, which I don't think the show's on anymore. I don't remember how many seasons they had.
Yeah,
that's a really, really fun one. Yeah, there's so many. We need. That's one thing I will say though. I want more werewolf books by women. I have Night Bitch, which is I don't know if it's a werewolf, but it might be a were-dog situation. That book that came out in July. I have it on my holds list right now. Did you either of you read it?
I ordered it. Mine's waiting at the library too.
Oh, it's funny. Oh, well, we'll be hopefully reading at the same time because mine should be. I'm e-reading it, and I think it's coming in soon. But yeah, just please more lady werewolves.
My favorite thing is monsters, kind of.
Yeah, my favorite thing is Monsters was both of our favorite comics when the year it came out.
Mm-hmm.
So good. Yeah, that's a fantastic. There are some really great comics about female werewolves. I mean, if you like ladies dealing with monsters, again, you can get Brea's book Mary, which is people taking care of monsters, Mary taking care of monsters. Mary Shelley's great to the nth degree granddaughter. But yeah, anytime you want a werewolf recommendation, email me. I got you.
And final thing I like to ask our guests is for a final girl song, we have a Spotify playlist where we add everyone's final girl song.
Brea, you've been a final girls.
What do you mean by a final girl song? What is that?
It can be. I've seen a lot of people take it like different ways. Like you're in the slasher movie and you're like fighting the monster, or is it like you're standing there victorious? Is it like end credit song? Like there's a little bit of leeway.
Wow.
Brea, you've been a final girl. What are your actual final girl songs?
I don't know. I have no idea. I think I wasn't prepared. Y'all, I've been listening just so much. I directed this movie and it's about country music singers. So I've only been listening to country music and country like inspired music. There's I'll just throw this out there, a great Nancy Sinatra song called Summer Wine, which is just amazing. And it could be a total final girl song. But there's all these like old country songs that I'll just like should be in horror movies, and I kind of like don't want to give them to y'all because I don't think I'm going to use them for this, but I think they should be. But there's like one by Townes Van Zandt called Waiting Around to Die. Ooh. Like how great for a horror movie
so good
to have something like that. But yeah, I mean, I'm gonna say maybe that Nancy Sinatra song would be pretty cool.
Okay, I will add that to the list.
Yeah,
playlist.
Yeah, your listeners should watch Brea's latest movie that she was in, Lucky, that she wrote.
Yeah, that's true.
That's a slasher movie.
Mm-hmm.
Was that the time loop one?
Well, it's not really time loop, but yeah, it's like happening over and over again. But yeah.
I love that movie, and also like talk about like female horror. I feel like I saw a lot of like men I follow online who were like, I didn't get it, and I'm like,
I spoke to them too. Yes, and I was like, I don't care.
This doesn't have to be for you.
Don't watch it then. I don't give a shit.
Yeah,
it's funny. I feel like I had that, and I had a movie I wrote called 12-Hour Shift, and I directed. They both came out like about 6 months apart, and it's because 12-Hour Shift is much more just like a dark comedy that's really like, it's really like, it's funny and kind of like Tarantino-esque and stuff, and you kind of could see the like differences between the audiences. Like Lucky is like this surreal slasher with this like, I mean, very much like we had like an agenda, whereas I did as well 12-Hour Shift, but it was much more of like, it was very much more subtle. So just seeing the different responses to those movies was interesting.
And so, Mallory, what's your final girl song?
The best that I can think of is that I have this song that I listen to before I do any like large speaking event. That's like my pump up song. It's Just a Tease by Thunder Mother, which is weird because I'm wearing a Thunder Mother t-shirt right now. It's an all female metal band that I'm obsessed with.
I, by the way, knew Mallory was going to say this band. I was like, which female metal band are you going to name right now?
I love them so. Well, it was either going to be a Thunder Mother song or a Burning Witches song, but It's Just a Tease by Thunder Mother is like the perfect, when you listen to it, it's definitely the song that would play like as I'm plunging the knife into the guy's head, and then I like stand up and I'm all covered in gore and stuff, and I like walk away victorious. It's definitely my my victory song. It's just like, it's what I always use to pump myself up. I don't remember when it started. When my first book came out, I think maybe I noticed that I was listening to the song and it was making me feel like powerful. I was like, oh, I need to keep doing this. And now anytime I do an event, I listen to it.
I will have to check it out. I mean, I'm definitely going to add it to the playlist, but I love this. I love that we had a like Mallory bingo card, like haunted house, like female metal band.
I have a thing where if I don't just like anything, I'm either obsessed with something or I don't engage with it.
This is what I always say, is that Mallory dives headfirst into the deep end of the pool. She's like either completely soaking wet, like down like 9 feet under, or she is like not dipped her toe in.
Well, thank you guys so much for coming on and talking to me.
Thank you. This was awesome.
Yeah, thanks for having us.
Yeah, so where can people find you online?
Well, you can find Reading Glasses wherever you listen to podcasts. We're now also on Spotify, Apple, whatever, basically anywhere you go to find a podcast, you can find Reading Glasses. We're also on Twitter and Instagram, at our Reading G podcast on Twitter and at Reading Glasses podcast on Instagram. I think that's all the only places where we have our newsletter, but that's,
yeah.
You can sign up on, if you go to our website, nextfilmfun.org/something/reading glasses.
You can find us. Just a quick Google.
But you got to add podcast, because if you just do Reading Glasses, you're going to get a bunch of glasses websites, which is also cool, but not what you're looking for.
Yeah.
You do need the little podcast in there. And then Girly Drinks comes out next month, right?
Yes, it does. Yeah, you can pre-order it basically anywhere. I am doing, I'm working with my old local indie that Brea and I love, Skylight Books. If you pre-order it through Skylight, I will be able to sign it for you and personalize it. If you want me to write something weird, maybe recommend you a werewolf book, I can write it in the book for you. But yeah, you can get it anywhere books are sold. I'm doing the audiobook for it, so you can also pre-order it on Libro FM or Audible or wherever you get your audiobooks from. Yeah.
All right, that's awesome. All right, well, thank you again for coming on and talking female horror.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Books in the Freezer is a bi-weekly podcast. We post episodes every other Tuesday. You can find us on Twitter at BooksFreezerPod, on Instagram at Books in the Freezer. I'm on TikTok at Books in the Freezer. You can send us an email at booksinthefreezer@gmail.com. I did forget what the email address was there for a minute. So this was the first episode I had recorded since moving my computer into my den area where I work from now. So editing it, I did notice there was parts where it was a bit echoey, or when the air kicked on and you can kind of hear it humming in the background. So just know that I did notice those things. So I am going to work to correct them in future episodes. I'm obviously also a big podcast listener, and I know how important sound quality is. So just know I did notice that, and I am working to fix that in future episodes. So thank you for your patience as we work to get the sound quality back to where it used to be. If you would like to support the podcast, there are a few ways you can do that. One of them is to support the podcast on Patreon. There's a $1, $3, and a $5 level. Lots of different perks, early episode releases, group chats, movie nights. You can go to patreon.com/booksinthefreezer to check that all out. Another way to support the podcast is to use the Amazon link that will be in the show notes. You click the link, it essentially takes you to Amazon, and you would just do whatever normal Amazon shopping you would normally do, and a small percentage of that comes back and helps the podcast. Things people have purchased recently using the Amazon link include some box hair dye, screwdriver bit set, diapers, just like, essential things. So thank you to all of you who use that link. And there are, of course, ways to support the podcast that do not involve spending any money. One of them is to just share about it on social media. Word of mouth is huge for podcast growth, especially small indie podcasts like this one. Also, leaving a review on something like Apple Podcasts is very helpful because it helps the podcast gain more visibility. So thank you to all of you who have taken the time to do that. I'm Stephanie. You can find me on Instagram at That's What She Read. That's with 2 A's, or on Twitter at lady_Gagnon. That's LADY_GAGNON. Thank you so much for listening, and see you next time on Books in the Freezer.